For more context, then, we're going to speak now to Simon Mabon, professor of international politics and Middle Eastern studies at Lancaster University. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us on the program today, Simon. So I think it's interesting that this has largely been framed as a symbolic step, but I want to ask you, why symbolic? You would think that officially recognizing statehood comes with a host of legal implications under international law, especially when that statehood is not respected by the majority of the international community. So why does this not have more concrete implications?
Yeah, you would think that, and I'm no international lawyer, but there is certainly an expectation that there are moral, legal, political obligations to recognizing another entity as a sovereign state, which is essentially what the UK has done. That being said, I think the reason for it being symbolic, or at least symbolic in my eyes and the eyes of others, is that it's doing very, very little to change the facts on the ground. It's not changing the approach that Benjamin Netanyahu's government is taking. You've already alluded to Bezalel Smotrich's calls to annex the West Bank. It's not going to change Donald Trump's stance on this. It's not going to change the US stance on this. And it's not going to alter the facts on the ground in Gaza, where tens of thousands have been killed and millions are suffering incredible hardships. Nor is it going to change the situation in the West Bank, where there are numerous illegal settlements that have just been greenlit by the Israeli government to go alongside the other settlements that are across the West Bank that have essentially punctured the territory that is supposed to be the essence of the Palestinian state. So you've got that, and then you've also got the practical questions about what this entity's capital would be. Theoretically, it's East Jerusalem, but the reality again is that East Jerusalem is separated from the vast majority of the West Bank by settlements and proposed settlements, and of course it's separate from Gaza. So the reality is, how can this political entity be viable in any way, shape, or form at present?
Indeed. I mean, as our international affairs editor pointed out moments ago, Leila Jacinto, it is significant that there has been no mention of what that state will look like, where its borders are, who comprises it, who will lead it. All that's been said is that Hamas cannot participate. So, I mean, where does that leave the more concrete process of deciphering exactly what this state is?
Well, I guess these are the really nitty-gritty questions that require serious discussion and serious work that is essential, absolutely essential, if there is going to be a viable Palestinian state. And that's what Keir Starmer seems to be alluding to, that this is about reviving the two-state solution. Now, the recognition of a Palestinian state is a prerequisite for that two-state solution in my eyes, in that you need two states in order to have a two-state solution. But going back to the Oslo Accords, where a lot of these things and the roadmap for peace was really established, a lot of the issues that you've been talking about in terms of territory, in terms of borders, in terms of capitals, in terms of administration, in terms of security, both for Palestinians and Israelis, they're issues that have not been resolved. And that's been for close to 4 decades now. So it's really thorny issues that seem to have been either pushed to one side because they're too difficult, or ignored because they're too difficult right now, in favor of a symbolic gesture that is hoped to put more pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to stop the horrors of what's happening in Gaza.
I mean, it's worth. We've had multiple conversations on France 24 about whether or not this is symbolic, or if it's beyond symbolic, if it's historic. I think it's worth asking: is this actually perhaps harmful to the Palestinian cause? Because we heard from Bezalel Smotrich earlier saying that Israel's response should be perhaps to annex the West Bank fully and officially in response to this announcement. The facts of the ground are clear. Benjamin Netanyahu has made clear that he will not stop the war, his offensive in the Gaza Strip, not in Gaza City either, despite hundreds of thousands of evacuations, famine, mass death. So is this going to maybe do more harm than good?
It's a really difficult question, because I think a lot of this depends on what you define as the Palestinian sort of cause. Are we talking about survival on a daily basis? In which case, well, yeah, the situation is dire. It's absolutely morally, politically, legally repugnant, and people are struggling to survive. But in both Gaza, of course, and in the West Bank as well, where we see daily raids against Palestinian cities, towns, Tulkarem, Jenin, of course, refugee camps. So that will almost certainly increase, I would imagine. So that is damaging to the Palestinian cause. But if the Palestinian cause is about getting a state, which of course it has to be about getting a state, that's what the whole two-state solution is about, then it's an important step. But that alone will not guarantee a state as yet. It needs a whole raft of other things to come alongside it. And this is where I think it's symbolic, it's historic, but it's quite vacuous on its own unless there is a raft of other measures that follow.
Precisely, Simon. I mean, Keir Starmer's logic in that sense behind this recognition, I think, is very curious. He said rather clearly that he had threatened to recognize a Palestinian state if the humanitarian situation did not improve. But I mean, as you touched upon there, if the objective is to alleviate suffering, you could argue that other actions on the part of the British government would have been or could be in the future much more efficient. Things like sanctions, urging an end to arms exports, perhaps standing up to Donald Trump. So why not take that route instead of symbolic statehood?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues at play there, and I would agree with your analysis for what it's worth. I think part of the issue is that Keir Starmer is beholden to certain divisions within his own party, within the country. He's trying to navigate his own issues, his own political future, some might say. And so going too hard against Israel would perhaps be causing him too much damage. Simultaneously, I think pushing too hard against the US president, Donald Trump, would be seen to be too big a risk for him at a time when he's already had numerous scandals, numerous issues to navigate in the past year or so. His popularity in the UK is pretty low at present. And so I think going against some of his erstwhile allies in support of the Palestinian cause would be seen as a bit of a risk. And my reading of Keir Starmer is that he's not really a risk taker. So that, of course, means that not enough is being done in pursuit of the Palestinian state, in pursuit of the alleviation of the suffering on a daily basis. As you say, sanctions, reconsidering arms sales, banning arms exports. There's a whole host of things that could be done that would really ratchet up pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. But this is an important step, albeit one that is somewhat symbolic.
Simon Mabon, professor at Lancaster University. Thank you very much, as always, sir, for joining us on the show today.